I saw you on the Jubilee thing, and
Mm,
yeah, I have to say that was like incredible.
thank you.
Did you? Yeah,
Appreciate
did
that.
you? How did that feel in the moment when you were there?
I thought I failed. I'm pretty sure immediately after Jubilee, I called my husband and I was like, well, I just wasted like $500 because the flights and whatnot. I was like,
Yeah,
yeah, I just flubbed. And he was like, why did you flub? And I'm like, I don't know. I talked for a long time. I feel like I was like getting to my point, and then I immediately got like the stoicism point was like something I thought I could really dig my teeth into. And then I got voted off. So I was like, well, I'm going to look pretty silly, but I guess
yeah.
not. I guess not. I'm not the best judge of my own performance, is what I've learned from this.
Thing. Do you think that Athenian masculinity and Spartan masculinity were the same in the Greeks? I think masculinity has never changed. All that's changed is the interpretation of it. And what I can't abide is this modern phenomenon that everything about masculinity, everything about being a man, which I am currently identifying as, everything about me is supposedly toxic.
Because I do feel that Pierce was kind of being a little bit unreasonable to any point that you made, even though it seems like you had a pretty mostly agreeable conversation. But
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I understand optically that that's already good for me. Like, I understand that if I'm being reasonable and my opponent isn't, the audience takeaway is at least going to go, well, at least one person showed up to be reasonable. My main concern is that I've never done Jubilee and I went first, which was in my mind, very stupid decision. But I was like, I'll go first because nobody else wanted to. And I'm like the student that if like nobody else volunteers, I'm like, I guess I will. And then I
oh, really?
watched everyone else who's like a Jubilee veteran go up. And then I was like, oh, this is how they get the clips because I think most people when they go on Jubilee, they prep like their pet topics that they want to hammer the person on and like some gotchas that they want to try to get. And they mostly clip farm. And so they're very aggressive. They interrupt a lot. They're super fast paced. And obviously I was none of those things. And so I was like, oh no, like I'm gonna look so silly, like next to everyone who's like quick and fast and interrupting him and like getting like gotchas. And I'm just like, so, do you know the difference between Victorian and Hellenistic Stoicism? And then they're like, all right, get out of here. And I'm like, dang it. That's where I
Yeah,
could get
yeah,
him.
yeah. I think that's my a lot of people's problem with Jubilee is it's unhealthy, but we cannot stop. It's junk food because it seems like anytime that somebody actually gets on there, makes a good point, and actually, begins to get into a real discussion, they get voted off. Which is like this is what is it even there for? It feels like it's almost opposite of what the whole point is. It's supposed to be a sit down debate, but the second we get to a real thing, like your point about stoicism, I don't even think Pierce had really a rebuttal.
And when young men in particular, I've got three sons from 32 to 24. I think we've got to a weird place where they feel like they are the most downtrodden, picked upon people in society, with good reason in many cases. And a lot of it is down to this, where they don't know what masculinity is. My argument is, I don't think it's ever been toxic. What's happened is you have men behaving badly, but you also have women behaving badly, and no one calls that toxic femininity.
Well,
Over to you.
I actually do call it toxic femininity. I think when
You
you look
do?
at, I do, when you look at like gender studies and philosophy on this, right? We use this term called masculinities and femininities because we understand that like the like samurai era of masculinity looks very different than maybe the knights of the round table and whatnot. So we understand that masculinity has somewhat morphed and shifted. And in every form of these masculinities or femininities, there are unhealthy elements to each of them. Could you grant me that?
Well, it depends what you mean. I mean, what do you think masculinity is?
In our society, I think masculinity.
No, no, not in your society. Just generally, what is it?
Yeah, in North America, we would broadly view it as like.
Well, hang on, you can't just say North America. Masculinity is a thing. It's not. It's not like territory specific. It has become that way with the toxic element.
Well,
but actual masculinity, when it was first devised
do you
as a
think that?
word, it's not an American thing. It's a global thing.
He was talking about toxic masculinity and toxic femininity, and
Yeah,
then you made the point of well, there's toxic traits in both men and women,
yeah, in
and
both genders.
yeah, exactly. Which I just took to be as like, duh, right? I thought that's at least, and that's a good tactic too when you're debating. Let's just agree on one thing, right? Let's
Hmm.
live in the same reality. And immediately you were like, will you give me that point? And he said, well, it depends on what you've been. I don't know what he said, but it was kind of like where you've been. He just spent it. Well, and it's like, wait a minute. how can I feel like that was a simple thing. Did you feel like he was kind of dodging that question?
I think Piers Morgan went there to promote a book. Um, and it's tough, right? Like Piers Morgan doesn't even tout himself as an intellectual. Like he's a show host and he knows that, right? And he's
Yeah.
got his opinions, but one thing I like about Piers is he never pretends that he's more than he is, right? It's pretty obvious if you watch Piers, like he's not overly sophisticated. He like doesn't have a lot of like philosophical background, which is like fine. He's really good at what he does. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, every time I would bring up something reasonable, I like he just had his talking points there, and he kept wanting to say them so that he could get clips of him saying to a feminist like, "Masculinity's always been the same," and then you're like, "Well, that's not true." Like you can look, Athenians and Spartans aren't even the same in their masculinity, and he's like, "Oh." Well, he wasn't prepped for he. I think part of this is that he's very used to doing a similar show. He does Uncensored, which is not for good discussions. It's for blood sport team competition to see who can
Yes.
like out dunk each other the quickest, right?
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to out dunk each other is to have pre-practiced lines of questioning with like a talking point that you know your audience likes. Because when you're going on these shows, most of the time it's team sports. You're trying to appeal to your base. You're not trying to persuade the other side. Whereas typically when I do debates, I'm mostly interested in persuading the other side to my position. And so Piers has talking points prepared, and he wasn't really ready. He was expecting probably me to come back with my talking points, which I would say a lot of the other contestants did. And that's just not. I don't have I don't have memorized partisan side talking points. I have like my thoughts on the situation.
And I think that's what makes you a very impactful debater, because I think one thing about rhetoric is, and this is true for Trump too, it's not like he has talking points, but he's very in the moment and free. And so I think because you're not locked down to talking, you just have a belief system and you're able to freely speak on it. And so I think it's tough when Pierce isn't really willing to have that debate. He didn't even seem like he was interested in the point about stoicism and masculinity.
Not
Would you, I'd love
really.
to, no,
Of
but
course
I
not.
was, I was like, yeah, that's why I had to reach out to you because like, yeah, this is great. What could you talk a little bit about how masculinity has evolved?
Yeah, I mean, there's this really great book that I recommend if anyone wants to explore masculinity through the ages. If you're in North America, you should read the book Musashi. Have you ever heard of Musashi?
No.
It's about this Ronin samurai in Japan, in I forget which age in Japan, but in like essentially medieval Japan, which every person who knows Japanese history just cringed when I said medieval Japan. But um, it's about this Ronin samurai, and he's trying to find his purpose and lot in life, and like who he should be, and what honor should look like, and how should he conduct himself. And he's confronted with all of these big questions that we have both human answers to and gendered answers to. Like, what do you do in the face of evil? What's your role as a man, Ronin samurai, in the face of evil? And it's a very interesting book to look into masculinity. And then I just encourage you to read like Achilles and just read these and contrast them and be like, there are some overlapping things that we kind of see universally emerge in masculinity in most cultures, which is like some propensity for aggression, whether that's in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. And some that also manifests, I think aggression is probably one of the biggest one for masculinity that we see, and it manifests in a whole bunch of ways. But then you'll also see massive disparities in the things that they value, right? Like the Spartans thought it was effeminate to touch coin or to know how to do trade, right? They thought it was soy. Whereas nowadays, like who are the most like masculine top men of North America? The merchants, right? Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, like the businessmen. They're the
Yeah.
sharks, the tycoons. Whereas like the Spartans would have looked at them and been like, disgusting, not
Wow.
even.
So Elon Musk would have been a bitch back in the day.
Yes. I mean, hard to say, if he was raised as a Spartan. Well, I think they were
Yeah.
very harsh too. I think he has autism, so I don't think he would have survived in Sparta
Did
because
they have autism back then?
Sparta was notorious for like letting any child who was insufficient die. So Sparta probably didn't, if I'm being frank. They were
Probably
very
not.
brutal. They were very
They,
brutal. Yeah.
I don't. They didn't have Tylenol back then, huh?
Yeah, that's actually the key thing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to RFK.
Or circumcision, I think that's the
Yeah.
new one right now. Well, I guess maybe they did. I don't know. Yeah, I guess the Spartans didn't have circumcision yet. They hadn't met Christianity yet.
No, yeah, not yeah, lucky them. That's a whole other thing. I don't even know if I'm for circumcision. Is that like what are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like
I think there's no medical need for it whatsoever, and it's just like
yeah,
harming
I
a
agree.
baby. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just like it's like an aesthetic weird thing. I don't know. Americans are really into it, and I'm from Canada originally, so like it's a you
Oh,
have to pay for it, which I know in America you pay for everything. In Canada, all of our healthcare is free. If you want a circumcision, it's considered elective, and you have to pay for it out of pocket. So like the rates of circumcision in Canada are like plummeting. Um,
that
which is
makes
like
sense.
yeah, because it's like oh yeah, I don't really need this aesthetic thing.
Well, so that's oh, I didn't know you were. Are you in Canada now? That's where you live?
No, no, no. I immigrated to America 2 years ago.
Okay. And so what would you say the benefits are to the healthcare system? Because I hear a lot of complaints. The argument against it is, oh, the wait times are long. And as an American who we have the what was it? Like we pay the most in healthcare and have the
Per
least.
capita.
Yeah. And so it's
Yeah.
like when I hear the wait time is long, my follow-up question is to that, okay, well, what happens when you eventually see the doctor? Is it fine?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's the same. Like doctors are sexist in the same ways that they are everywhere else. So the wait times are a little bit longer. I think about if you're waiting for like a special referral, I think on average we're Canada has 2 week longer wait time than Americans. So it's not actually that big of a difference. The only difference is there's a lot less privatized healthcare. So if I have money in Canada and I want immediate service in America, you can just do that, baby. But in Canada, unless you're in like certain cities, you're probably not going to be, you'd have to fly. Like you'd need to go to Toronto or you'd need to like
Got it.
go to like Vancouver or something to get that immediate private healthcare. It's not just like everywhere. But yeah, otherwise, when it comes to like the more general, like normie person healthcare, the wait times are not actually significantly worse. To be honest, the biggest issue we're facing in Canada is like specialist drain. So a lot of our specialists move to America because there's private think tanks and private healthcare, and they can just get paid a lot more. So we have a major issue in having enough specialists, and then our population's small as well. So it's hard. I have a pretty rare autoimmune disorder. So finding a specialist that works with my immune disorder is like next to impossible in Canada. Like there's like one and they don't live anywhere. And if I move to where they are, they'll move probably or something they're really, really hard to get a hold of. So that's kind of the major issue you see in Canada is specialization. But again, that's a combination of small population and brain drain.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting because so there seems to be, I guess, some cons to that, but overall, I would say that that's a more effective, strategy to helping people if they're sick. And I think it's just a big problem we're here, and I can't wrap my head around, people
Yeah.
who argue against it.
Yeah, I mean, I just recently, so I had a double ear infection last week. This ear is still deaf actually right now. Um, and I don't have American health insurance yet. So I had to pay $100 out of pocket. And then my medication, which I've had this type of ear infection before in Canada, is $8. It was $75 here. Luckily, I found a coupon for it, so it was brought down to $35. But now, because of my hearing loss, if it persists, I have to see an ENT, like a specialist, and that's $300 just to see him, right? And that's like all of this is free in Canada, right? So this whole time I'm going like, okay, well, do I want to see a specialist for my ear, or should I just accept being deaf and hope it gets better so I can pay my rent? And like, yeah, it's very like when Canadians complain about our healthcare, we should do so in comparison to other universal healthcare. If you're not in the healthcare field where you're even universal yet, we're not on the same paradigms. Like there isn't a comparison between universal healthcare and private. Private is just awful. Like the fact that so many Americans, especially with the insurance going up by like 4 times pretty soon here, if not already for a lot of people, with the big beautiful bill, if we are just dooming like 22 million people to just not having covered healthcare while we've allowed like a healthcare private insurance ratchet to collude with hospitals to jack up prices so that things are just no longer affordable out of pocket.
Mm-hmm.
We have this situation where we're basically dooming people to genuinely having to pick between money and body. And it also it poses this really interesting question in like a modern world where we always think that if somebody harms our body or if something happens to our body, that's the worst thing that can happen. And, if somebody financially ruins you, that's secondary, but at least you're still alive. But we're increasingly seeing that, like, oftentimes people are actively making choices to sacrifice their body over and over and over again to like make ends meet. And that's terrifying to think about. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy, we're like bottoming out like 22 million Americans. And then we're like wondering why they're not like more productive in society. And you're like, hello.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that speaks to why a lot of people were kind of sympathetic to Luigi. That whole thing of, I love watching talking heads on TV talking about, I don't understand, murder is bad. And how can they celebrate? And it's like, my brother in Christ, it's not celebrating murder so much as thousands of people are dying from not receiving healthcare. And so it's like, what about their murder? That's also murder too. So it's not that, I or anyone rather in good faith is cheering for murder, but I understand the frustration. And so many people are like, I don't understand it at all. It's like, really? What are you saying?
It's also interesting because I think as we've gotten so privileged in society to be oftentimes so far from threats to our physical body and far from violence, our philosophy, our theory of violence, like our understanding of violence has gotten so immature in society, right? Like I think most people, as somebody, I'll be super clear, I'm a liberal, right? I'm not a leftist. I am a
Oh,
lib.
really? Are you
I'm
a classical lib?
Not a classical liberal, because I think basically that's a conservative at this point. But I am like a more Democrat pilled.
Yeah.
Not that I love the Democrats, but like that arc of liberal. And at the same time, when I talk to my liberal friends, the one thing that they'll say to me is like, well, violence is just like, that's the worst possible thing. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like violence, like just so it's clear, violence is a tragedy, right? When you look at things like war, that's the worst, most tragic outcome of a shitty situation, right? And also, we should have gone to war with Hitler. That was the right thing to do. And it's fucking awful that we had to do it, right? And so we don't have like a comprehensive, complex understanding of violence, right? So we could look at Luigi Mangione and go like, yeah, we shouldn't sacrifice the institution of judicial process and not charge him for murder. He should be charged for murder. That's what he did. But goddamn, I certainly don't feel bad for his victim. I don't know how to.
It's tough.
I don't know how to, right? And people can't hear that and comprehend it being like, you can do both of saying murder is wrong and an institution that prohibits it is a damn miracle. And we should love that thing. And also something else is going on here, and somebody not directly murdering you, but making it so that you can't afford insulin so they can line their pockets. That's fucked in a way that nobody could have even conceived of 200 years ago. And we don't have the answers for that. And it's unsurprising why violence emerges as a result of the tragedy of choices.
Absolutely. I agree. And I want to stay on the topic of violence because I feel like that's one of I feel like we're talking about masculinity and
it's very related.
It plays a big part in that. As a man, you're not supposed to show any kind of empathy or feelings. We're supposed to bottle it up. And I think that created a big crisis. You hear the men's health crisis, young men, they don't have friends now. Everybody's friend is Chat GPT, and I think that pushes them to the manosphere kind of, if no one is talking to young men in a way that is inviting and acknowledging their struggle, then it's obviously they're going to turn to whoever, whether it's Andrew Tate or the manosphere. I mean, it's funny, Jordan Peterson, I'm sure you're familiar.
Yeah, I have a secret soft spot, okay? I don't stan anything post 2020 Jordan Peterson, but I have a soft spot for Peterson. Yeah.
Well,
look, he's like your crazy uncle now. Don't listen to anything he says now, but he's not a malicious actor. He didn't start out as one, at least.
No, and there was a time where he was just straight. He was just kind of telling young men to clean your room, right? Which is just kind of like, I think young men do kind of lack a discipline of and a responsibility. And I think that he started down that path, and that's why he spoke to so many of the youth because no one was speaking to them. And not only were people not speaking to them, but the only ones on the Democratic side that were, they were calling them sexist. I mean, they had
Mhm.
you remember the article where they spent what 20, what was it, $20 million talking to consultants
To
to
be
figure out.
clear, they didn't actually get the 20 million. I know the organization. They didn't actually get, they budgeted for 20 million because everyone who does campaigns always over asks. You're not going to ask for a
Okay.
million if you like need five. You're going to ask for
Yes.
20
Oh,
and then
so how
hopefully
much
you'll get
was it?
five. I don't know their budget, but they've been clear to me
Okay.
they did not get $20 million. They
I'll tell you
asked,
what.
they budgeted for 20 million. They didn't get 20 million.
I'll tell you what. You could tell. They could have hired me for $20. It's like it's not a
Well,
complicated.
look, as much as I'm defending them on the 20 million, I won't defend them on much else, I guess is what I
Yeah.
will say. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so I guess we're familiar with some of the toxic traits for masculinity, but you brought up a term, toxic femininity.
Yeah.
And what could you talk about that? What is that exactly?
So again, femininities emerge within the culture that you exist within. I think it's downstream of biology, but of course, biology informs it. And femininities in North America, um, on average, I think we have kind of like two really dominant clusters. We're starting to get like feminism has done a really good job in creating, I think, more diverse femininities that women can exist within, which is good, by the way. But generally, we see it as somebody who's soft, right? More nurturing, more understanding. There's increasingly also this element of kind of like, there's like the girl boss archetype that's like starting to emerge, that I think is a woman embracing like more prototypically masculine traits. But if we think about like the typical femininities, we still are thinking about, moms, nurturing, caring for you, lecturing you. They're your day to day, making you survive, teaching you, educating you, growing you, helping you, supporting you. That's kind of like the main things that we think of for like femininities.
Hmm.
And a lot of people be like, this isn't inherent to. I don't care. I don't care about any of that. I don't care about what's inherent. Most of this is not inherent
Hmm.
because epigenetics will tell you that, right? There's like been really, really interesting stuff coming up about like genes and twin studies and problems with it. Like most of this stuff is not inherent, and I would just agree with that, right? Um, but what we see emerges in our society is this conception of a soft, nurturing, caring, prototypically woman. And so if we think about what's toxic about some of these traits, okay, well, are you familiar with Aristotle's concept of the golden mean?
I've heard of it, but could you just refresh?
Yeah, it's my favorite way to think about like moral virtues. So basically, he says that like when you're thinking about a moral virtue, there is a golden mean that it looks like. And he kind of frames it, he doesn't say this, but it's kind of like an objective thing. But the way that it enacts is somewhat relative. It's the perfect way and the perfect time and the perfect person and the perfect, like, it's perfect, 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 perfect. He calls this beauty, right? And then when you move away from the golden mean on either side, there are vices. And so, right, if compassion is like the golden mean, okay, well, if you think about compassion that's gone too far in that it's too compassionate, that's enabling, right? And if you go too far away from compassion, that's something like coldness, maybe like harshness or cruelty, right? And so when I think about toxic femininity, I try to think about in what ways is the golden mean of these traits that we've assigned to femininity, and what are ways that it can look unhealthy, and what are the unhealthy ways that we see women occupy more often. So enabling is a lot more common in women than like harshness and cruelty, although that's usually more associated with masculinity. Although I would say with like the girl boss popularity, increasingly we're seeing women doing what would be more toxically masculine things like being harsh and cruel. Um, Nurturance. Okay. If nurturance is our golden virtue, okay, what's nurturance gone too far? Probably something like martyrdom, right? Like it's not good. There's so many women I know that they have children and all they are now is a mother. That's all they are. And that's all they allow themselves to be. That's all society allows. I actually think that that's toxic femininity. I think it's unhealthy
Oh,
because,
really? You think just being
yeah,
a mom? Okay.
no, not just being a mom. If you are a stay-at-home mom, that's awesome. If your
Oh.
identity is just being a mom, that I think is actually toxic nurturance, right? Because
Mm.
those children are now the basis of your identity, which what an unfair pressure to put on the shoulders of a child. And that child will grow, and that child will become an 18-year-old. And what does that woman become when her children leave? She goes, well, I'm still a mother. It's like, yeah, but not in any of the ways that we identify it. You're a mother in like this distal way. And what you see is a lot of these mothers talk about empty nest, and they have a hard time transitioning out of it, and they have a hard time finding identity. And a lot of them kind of go like, oh my gosh, it's so nice having hobbies again. And you're like, girl, you could have had this the whole time, right? And they might say, well, I couldn't. My husband wasn't willing to help out. And I'd say, that's probably true, which is a problem with our marriage institution. But like, you know, I think nurturance gone too far is self-martyrdom. And I think what often comes out of that, another thing that comes out of that self-martyrdom, think about the mother who's a perpetual victim. Well, if a mother has nurtured you so far that her entire identity is nurturing you to the point that she has denied herself pleasure, meaning, and purpose outside of you, then anything that goes wrong, any way that you're upset with her, all of her sacrifice is for naught. And now she's left with this hopeless sense of victimhood. And it's like, of course she is, right? And so when you think about like the self-focused victim mother, this is in many ways like another form of toxic femininity, of a good trait, nurturance, caring for others, that's probably gone too far, where now her identity is exclusively in others. And if you set any boundaries, if you tell her no, if you tell her, hey, I love you, but you did mess up in this way, that's like a destruction to her entire identity. So she has two choices, right? To give up her identity as the self-martyring mother, which she's nobilized in her mind. She's like, that's a good thing. Or you're being a bad guy and you just don't appreciate her sacrifice, right? Those are her two options. And most people choose the easy option, obviously.
Right. Oh, that's okay. So on that, what is, because you're married, right?
Yep.
How long have you been
8
married?
years.
Okay, nice. And so what do you see? I assume you have a nuanced, opinion on the role of a wife, because
Yeah.
some people would go, the role of a wife is to obey her. It's like a dominant, like Christian kind of, the woman leads. No, that's liberals. Christianity and conservatism is more like the man leads and the woman follows. And then I'll see a lot of people on the right, just kind of claiming why women were designed by God to lead. I don't know if you've heard this argument where women shouldn't vote. Like a lot
I
of the
have.
What do you think of that? What do you think? Should women vote?
Yes.
Or are they too emotional? Yes? Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you think women should not vote?
I mean, I thought I did, but I'm hearing some good arguments. I mean, they say they're too emotional. I've heard people say that
What's the main gender in jail?
well, I try not to assume people's gender, so I wouldn't know.
But it's men
Yeah, it's definitely
who do
men.
most of the crimes. And a lot of crimes are done in impulsive, emotional explosions, right? The issue is that I think what happens when we talk about like women being too emotional is two things. Number one, we can go back to Victorian Stoicism, which has been beaten into young men. And I think Victorian Stoicism is bad Stoicism. Hellenistic Stoicism, you want to talk about Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, I'm all for it. I love that shit. I think it's wonderful, and I think we need a lot more of it. Victorian Stoicism is a bunch of like 1800s British boys who are rich, discovered Hellenistic philosophy, and they're like, this is very interesting. Let's do this. But their only takeaway was never show emotion. And it's like, that's not what the Stoics believed. They didn't believe not showing emotion. The whole, like, I can't remember, what is it? Amor fati. I love my fate. Stoicism isn't not experiencing emotion. Stoicism is like looking your tragedy and your passions in the face and acknowledging it and going, I love my destiny no matter what it is, right? It's the classic story. I don't know if you've heard the story of like the old man. He's walking along and his son breaks his leg and the village says, oh, what a tragedy. You must be so sad. And he says, it is what it is. The Stoic response. And then later war happens and every son gets drafted except for his son because his leg's broken. And they go, wow, you must be so blessed. You're so lucky. You must be so happy. And he says, it is what it is, I love my fate, regardless of the choice, you know. And the story continues it much in this fashion, right? A tragedy happens, a good thing happens, and he responds the same way. And that's what stoicism is. It's not
Right.
bottling your emotions until they explode sideways out in anger, which for whatever reason society has decided male anger is not emotion, which is a fun thing. Probably because anger is the most common way that men feel comfortable expressing their emotion. And so men can't be emotional. So we have to tell ourselves that anger is not emotion. That
Yeah.
seems to be like what it is. And not that we actually tell ourselves anger is an emotion. We'll just watch angry expressions and go, he's not being emotional unless it's a woman doing it. Then she's being emotional, right? Um,
Yeah.
the
Sure.
idea that women are emotional and men are not true. Are women more subject to the volatility of hormonal change, which can cause like emotional fluctuations? Yes, that is true. That is very
Right.
true. Right. Whereas men, their testosterone kind of like it dips. I think it spikes in the morning and then it drops throughout the day and then kind of, but it's mostly like this. It's kind of like this all throughout their life cycle. Whereas for women, it's like this all over the place. Right. The issue is that that means that men are in many ways guarded against some of the more extremes of emotionality. It also means that men are less practiced at managing and regulating through the extremes of emotionality. And I think this is why when you see men experiencing extreme emotions, you see a lot of dysregulation, right? You see a lot of explosiveness, right? Because men don't often experience as extreme of emotions, that when they do, they don't know what to do with it. And we don't teach men what to do with emotions, right? Like what happens when a little boy is tantruming? He's throwing his bricks around. Maybe he's like trying to like hit his mom or something. He gets sent to his room. There's no co-regulation that happens there. Right? So what do we teach men? When you have feelings, isolate and deal with it yourself. Nobody wants to look at it,
Oh yeah, for sure.
right?
Like I've been taught to not cry in front of women and like my girlfriend. That's
Mm-hmm.
like other men, and they're like, hey, don't let her see you as weak because then she won't respect you. Do you think respect? Like how does that work? Like with in your opinion with marriage? Because
I
how
have an unpopular theory. Will tell you
okay,
that I
go
have an
ahead.
unpopular
Yes,
one.
yeah.
So this is my and my husband. We have cultural views of femininity and masculinity. Most women, they want their man to be more masculine than he is feminine. He can have lots of feminine traits. In fact, most women want him to have lots of these feminine traits. They want an emotionally available guy. They actually do. But they're not lying when they say they want an emotionally available guy. They do. They just don't want him to be more feminine than he is masculine. That's where they're going to get the ick. And I maybe would argue it's bad and women should get over that, especially if they want to like abolish some of this like gender stuff. But it is what it is, right? Women
Mhm.
don't like it when men are more feminine than they are masculine. And there's lots of ways you can perform masculine. And so vulnerability is a wonderful thing. The problem is that
Mm,
vulnerability is still associated with femininity. So if you're a really, really
yeah,
vulnerable guy and you have nothing else that's masculine, they are more likely to see you as weak, right? And I think it's
right.
bad. I think that men can be feminine and not be viewed as weak, but this is just where society is right now. I don't think that this has to be the way, but it is what it is right now. And I think for men, if my husband wasn't open to me about his emotions, our marriage would have failed. No question about it. Marriages will fail when you are not open with your wife about your emotions.
Yeah,
If your wife is so cold that no matter how masculine you are, any amount of femininity makes her want to walk away, that's unhealthy on her.
yeah,
That's not a good partner. And
right.
that's not somebody you want raising your boys because we see that when people bottle emotions, regardless of gender, when you bottle emotions and they explode out sideways, oftentimes in rage, that leads to worse outcomes, worse heart health, right? Or cancer, right? If you
Yeah.
don't express your feelings, there's this classic line from Gabor Mate where he says, "Look, I don't get sad about things. I just get cancer." And like that's kind of what we see, right? Is like if you bottle
Yeah.
all this stuff, cool, it's going somewhere, and sometimes it's metastasizing in your body, right? And that's not a good outcome. Or you're becoming an alcoholic, who also
Right. Yeah.
more men, by the way, but they're not emotional, by the way. They're just alcoholics and in jail all the time, and well, yeah, and homeless all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's also this, I agree. There's also this notion that women are inherently better. Like I've seen, there's a fun meme that goes around where they say, if women ruled the world, there'd be no war. Do you agree with that?
No, I think
Okay.
war is human. War, like when we talk about this gender stuff, I think it's very easy when you get fixated on gender stuff to think that gender stuff explains the whole world. It doesn't. There's lots of genderless things. war is one of these things, right?
Yes, I
Queens
agree. All
have
right, yeah.
war, kings have war, because war is usually about fundamental principles well outside of our gender. It's about things like ownership and land rights. It's about things like religion. It's about things like which divine is correct. It's about things like, is democracy good or not, right? It's these big, it's about oil. It's oftentimes
Right.
about greed and stuff as well, right?
Yeah.
I'm nobilizing war. It's also about lots of bad things, right?
No, yeah,
Um,
I like it. You know what?
this
You're
isn't
selling.
gendered. Women are religious and men are religious. Women are
Yeah.
greedy and men are greedy, right? So when we talk about gender, we have to be cautious to not start thinking about all of the universe as gendered, which I think a lot of people, when they're interested in the gender conversation, we start to do. I can even have this kind of bias where I start being like, is this feminine or masculine? And I'm like, wait, why am I thinking about this gender? This is not a
I
gendered
think
thing.
I think that's a uniquely left problem where people focus. I only hear that notion that women are perfect from the left, and I think it's sort of an overcorrection from
Yep,
all
I
of
agree.
the yeah,
That's like
right. I mean,
reactionary
obviously,
inherently.
exactly right,
Mhm.
and that's what I loved about the way you present your arguments is it's very matter of fact and nuanced. But there's a lot of how do we fight against that part? Because I think we share a lot, pretty much the same political beliefs. I was like a Bernie bro. You know what I
Cool.
mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
Uh,
Bernie.
yeah. So I think free healthcare, all that stuff. But
Democrats did him dirty. I don't think he would have won, but still, they did him dirty anyways.
I mean, well, I guess we'll never know. I mean, it's funny
Yeah.
when they had the option to get a left populist versus a right fake populist because I don't think Trump is a real populist, but he definitely tapped into that energy.
It's a little bit hard to blow your pockets as much as he has and be a populist. It's a little
Yeah,
crazy.
exactly. But people think he was, and that's all that matters. And
Although, to be fair, a lot of communists did the same shit. So maybe it is a populist thing to like steal from the people. I don't know. Maybe it's just a
well,
human thing.
yeah, I think it's definitely definitely human. But it's just interesting that the Democratic Party really sucks, and I think they do a lot of the culture war stuff, a lot of the, men are bad and women are good and white people are bad,
Mhm.
and minorities are good, which is like not, I think the same is true for race, the way you put it for gender, where it's just people are bad people, right? And I guess what are some of the ways you see that you can fight against, I guess, your own side? Because there's a lot of women that I would think that would look at you and kind of disagree, maybe even see you as a traitor in terms
Yeah.
of feminism.
Yeah,
What do you?
I've definitely I get called to pick me a lot less because I'm a very strong feminist debater. So I
Mm,
think I've finally shirked myself. I'm free of those shackles.
great.
I think the girlies believe that I am not against the girlies, which is essential to being a pick me, right? A pick me means you have to be throwing the other girls under the bus specifically.
Yes.
Um, oh, I got distracted by the pick me thing. Um, how do you
Just I
police your
guess
own? That was your question, right?
yes. Yeah.
I mean, if you believe in an idea, so I'm a feminist, I'm liberal, I'm Christian, even though most of those labels probably won't tell you much about my belief systems because my own group will reject me. Like most Christians do not like me. Most of them think I'm a heretic. And I would happily welcome them to a theological debate if they would like. Um, but when it comes to policing your own side, I think it's tough. I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I believe in things because I believe in the idea. I'm a liberal because I believe in strong institutions. I believe vehemently in democracy, and I believe in social safety nets. That's why I'm a liberal. I believe very strongly in liberties, rights, and freedoms, right? I think it's essential that people have access to as many liberties as we can give them and as many rights as necessary to keep them safe, probably more than just to keep them safe. I think rights are the most important, and then liberties are the things that we should try to give people as much as we can, assuming we don't
Yes.
harm
Yeah.
other people. That's why I'm a liberal. I'm not a liberal because I love other liberals. I'm not a liberal because other liberals are nice people. And so I think one of the things that I think it's very tough in this like left, right, my side, your side, tribalism thing is we don't want to police our own, because if we do that, we run the risk of two things. Number one, we run a risk of becoming a token for the opposing side, which I'm left leaning. I'm very vehemently opposed to Trump. Like I vehemently oppose Trump.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I care a lot about democracy, and I don't think I've seen somebody hate America or democracy as much as I've watched this man put his own predilections and preferences over it.
Do you think Trump is a fascist?
Probably accidentally. I don't think like intentionally. Like I don't think he's not like Hitler, right? He's not like running around being like, man, I just really want this thing. The issue is like what's fascism? It's like
Yeah.
it's a hyphenated, it's a hyphen of preference, right? Like puppy fascism could be a thing. Crypto fascism is just crypto bros who want to destroy democracy and establish some like crypto thing, right? Like a neo-Nazi is just basically like a white supremacist or like nationalist fascist, right? So fascism is just like tyranny of preference. Is he doing that? Yes, because his preference is punishing his political enemies and lining his wallet and consolidating power, right? But it's like,
Right.
does it look like Nazis? No, he's not a Nazi at all. I don't think
No.
he cares about the Jews in any way, shape, or form. So
Yeah, I don't think he has any
accidentally,
ideology.
I think he is accidentally, yeah. Anyone who is
Yeah.
as anti-democratic as he is has to be
Yeah,
some form of authoritarian, at least.
for sure. And
Um,
I just think that because it's an interesting question, because then, I agree we shouldn't police our own, but I don't think
well, we should
we're the
police our
one.
own.
Well, I thought you just said we shouldn't.
We definitely should.
Oh, okay.
I'm outlining
Well,
why it's hard.
okay, so you think we should, because I believe in debate. I believe that, while going on things like Jubilee might feel in the moment like this was a failure, it in the grand scheme of things isn't. I think you should go on things like Piers Morgan and and have debate. But then there's people that staunchly are like other leftists that are like, I won't talk to whoever it is. It's like I'm not gonna go to a. Are you familiar with the podcast bros? Andrew Schultz, any of that?
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Kamala didn't go on Rogan, and that's what I'm talking about. Where it's like the choose. It's Rogan didn't prevent her from going. She
Nope.
chose not to go. And there's a
Yep.
lot of left people that are like, well, I'm not going to talk to the other side because they're racist. It's like, how do we win?
Yes. Yeah. So this is the tension, right? What we're talking about is a dialectic. We must police our own. Because if I want liberals to be good, I have to call out liberals when they step outside of what I thought we all agreed was a core,
Right.
like unifying principle. We have to do that, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I can't do it so much that I am tone policing, nagging, controlling, and pushing that person away. This is actually where we can learn, I think, from femininity. But this is, in many ways, the feminine nurturing. Okay, you can't have a mom who's so laissez-faire that she lets anything go and her kids go wild and they have no unifying principles and there's no structure, right? That's not good.
Right.
You don't want that parent. Right? Maybe it's not gendered. Maybe it's parental. But also, you don't want to be the nagging parent. You have to have some tension between trusting and giving grace, even to fuck ups, and knowing which fuck ups to give grace for, and hard lines. This is the
Yeah.
dialectic of a group to be maintained well. Is you have to figure out what are the things we are hard on and what are the things that we give grace for. And I think what's happening on the left, the right actually has this figured out pretty well. They're right now kind of having a meltdown, uniquely. But for the past 10 years, the right has been quite good at this, where they infight all the time. But when it comes to the federal election, they all get behind each other, right? They unify, they get it, right? The left has not figured this out, right? We infight, we police each other. And then when it comes to the federal election, we don't get together. We have people being like, a vote for Kamala is just as bad as a vote for Trump. And it's like, no, it's not. No, it's not.
Right.
These,
Yeah.
like, talk to any trans person that you are friends with. It's not the same world. Talk to any woman. It's not the same world. And it's actually such a slap in the face to pretend that it is. Even though we can maybe agree that on some issues, Kamala is closer to Trump than some like more leftist people would prefer. That's totally fine. That's what your primaries are for. That's what your like local and state elections are for.
Which we didn't have a primary for Kamala.
We did not have a primary, but
Yeah.
I would argue there's good reason why we didn't. The issue with the Kamala thing was, I don't, we didn't have a primary, but the issue is that all of our delegates and like the people that we vote for to put in the votes for who becomes the president, we don't vote in the primary, like who has to be president. We're voting for delegates who get to vote who is the president. Those people did vote for Kamala. So it's like, it's not like it was completely like just undemocratic. It's not like people are just like her, but they kind of were just like her, right? That's like part of the issue.
They kind of were. I mean, regular people. I mean, Kamala was so unliked. She lost to her own state to Andrew Yang. Do you remember that? I'm going all the way back to.
I don't think that makes her super. I mean, Andrew Yang was an incredibly likable politician. I liked Andrew Yang.
Oh
right?
no,
So
I know.
that doesn't
I
mean
think
Kamala is not well liked. That means that she was put against like one of the most effective at reaching people politicians in the last like 15 years and lost. And it's like, yeah, of course she did, but like that doesn't mean she's not liked.
Well, that's definitely not somebody that we should put to go up against Donald Trump, one of the most.
She's the most. The issue is that so when you're thinking about as somebody, so I actually consult the DNC pretty often. And when you're thinking about who to put up, when you're like, okay, we should have been pressuring Biden. Biden shouldn't have rerun, clearly.
Yes,
but we couldn't have precisely known that because he had some good days and he had some bad days. And he also had like a bit of like the needed done like iron vice around him. So it was hard to sometimes know where he was at. But it's a really important election and incumbents win. Why do incumbents win? One of the biggest reasons is because they have hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising behind them at this point and years of it, right? And Trump had 4 years as a president, right? 2 years before running of advertising himself. And the whole time Biden was in power, he was still advertising himself. And then he also had the election. So you're going against somebody who's got like, what is that? Almost 10 years of advertising, of getting his name out there. He's a name that people know. And Biden is a name that people know. Who else do people know that like we can rally behind that's also close to good relations? Because you also need a president that has good relations with Congress and knows a lot of the head caucuses of the Congress. And you also need a politician who's got a good relationship with the Senate. They need to know who Chuck Schumer is. They need to know who some lead senators are who kind of decide the direction that Senate go. So when it comes to like, who do we pick? Kamala was the only one that even made sense. The problem with the Democrats is we have such a paucity of leadership that Kamala was the only reasonable choice. She really was.
Well, that's
is
a problem.
That's the problem.
Yeah. That's a big
problem.
problem. And I think that to take blame away from Kamala and back to Biden, he should have resigned. And the fact that he didn't is an age problem that we have in America where everybody's old as fuck. You know what I mean? And
every boomer just like won't let go.
They're not dying. How are they not? It's crazy how they're living so long. And but I think that turned shout out to Flintstone Jewels.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that turned a lot of people off because we all so the DNC is interesting. So you work for them or you consult with them? Is that
I consult with them, on like media strategy.
So I'm curious, what was their perception of Biden and his deterioration? Because from what I see people that pretended like he was great and there was no problems. And then a normie kind of perspective was like, this guy's losing it. And he was losing it years ago. And so by the time it got to the debate where it was on display, that destroyed the credibility of the Democratic Party, the DNC, the elites telling us just fall behind. It destroyed it completely. Do they have any?
Part of the issue is that the reason that it destroyed it is for a stupid reason, right? Which is like fast on your feet rhetoric is not actually a measure of leadership. Like, not really. Like, look at Biden's presidency. His presidency was awesome. It was really good. He got some really important bills passed. He had more bipartisan bills passed than like years before, right? He had done immeasurable work for unions. He had done immeasurable work for technology. He had been handling China really well in a very sophisticated way. He'd been getting out of the way of the Federal Reserve and just letting them do their job, which is good. That's a good thing to do because Jerome Powell's the GOAT, right? Biden, at a decisionary level, was doing a fantastic job. The issue is he wasn't quick. which again is a sign of age, right?
And
That's a
I
problem.
I don't think it wasn't. It's not that it just wasn't quick. I think that it's fair to say that he lost quite. He wasn't all there. It's not that he just wasn't quick.
I think by the end, yeah, he was definitely showing like signs of like mental degradation. The issue is like, first of all of the tests. So my background is actually in psychometry, which is giving like neuropsychological tests. So I'm actually very familiar with a lot of the tests that he was probably administered. The tests that he passed and he did pass, I assume that he would pass, are the same tests that Trump has passed, right? I'm sure you maybe have seen a clip of Trump being like, I passed the test. They like gave me like the 3 things to remember. And it's like, that is like,
Yeah.
but like if you fail that test, we know that you probably have moderate to severe like dementia of some form, right? We know
Yeah.
that like you're performing at like severe brain injury level at that point. Like this is like the bottom of the barrel, which is not the greatest. It's also tough because when they give aptitude tests are normalized to your cohort. So what? Biden is, I don't know how old he is. It's like, is he 70, 80?
Oh man, I don't know. He's
70, 83. He's 83. For an
yeah.
83-year-old, he's doing pretty damn good. He's doing pretty awesome. The issue is
Right.
that, and so like
He
when they're
shouldn't
like,
be
they're
president.
performing well. Well, he is performing well for an 83-year-old. He's probably actually performing above average for a lot of 80-year-olds. The issue is that I don't want 80-year-olds running the country. But this is not a Biden problem. This is a boomer problem. The boomers just like won't like, I don't want. Trump is also showing massive signs of mental degradation. He doesn't know what's going on. Like, and he's falling asleep.
Yeah.
There's photos of him falling asleep during meetings, right?
Yeah,
He's
poor guy.
regularly saying, I don't know why I pardoned this person. He recently just pardoned some Democrat in Texas that basically has screwed up the Texas like seats. And if he hadn't pardoned this guy, the Republicans could have run for another seat. But he just pardoned this guy and like nobody knows why. And he was like, I don't know, someone just told me to. So it's like, okay, Trump is also not there. And so it's tough where it's like, yes, I agree. Biden should have stepped down. And I think that would have been the right decision. It's really easy post hoc to know what the right decision is. It's really hard in the midst to know what the right decision is. And I think we should be quick to not assume that the reason that they made these decisions was just because they're all stupid and want to hold on to power. That's part of it for sure. But there's also things like incumbency. There's also things like, his entire track record as a president. There's also things like respecting the president's wishes and wills. If he wants to run again, it's really weird to tell the president, like, actually, no, bro, you can't, right? And so there's a whole bunch of factors that go into it that, yes, I can agree. Post hoc, we can completely agree that it was the wrong decision. The issue is that we can't go into the future assuming that the certainty that we have right now about the decision about Biden is a certainty that we should have had about Biden when we were making the decision. And the people who had that level of certainty, they now feel vindicated. They're not. They shouldn't be vindicated in their confidence at all. And this is a really big issue with This is a big issue with post hoc fallacy. You're right when you make a prediction, maybe 30% of the time. But if your confidence for your prediction, which will be right 30% of the time, and your confidence for it is 90%, your confidence is far outscaling your prediction accuracy. And this is what the post hoc fallacy can do to us, right? Is it can make us have a big bias in how confident we feel about a thing, especially because you know what you're going to remember when you were right about the president. You know what you're not going to remember? All those times you were wrong about everything fucking else.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess that it's not even so much of a prediction. I guess a lot of people had it's I think a lot of us were just watching in real time the deterioration and being honest about it, and then watching people that are like trusted news people lying to our face. I think it's less about, it's not like we predicted anything. It's just kind of like it
Let's
goes
say
beyond.
he didn't step down. Let's say he didn't step down. What if he won? Because Kamala lost, but everyone's like by a landslide. Not actually. In each state where she lost, it was actually pretty slim margins. And what was the most searched Google search on the day of the election? Do you know?
Was it cats and dogs?
No, it was where's Joe Biden? Or and the second was who is Kamala Harris? This is an advertising issue because most people don't pay attention to politics, right? And so it's possible that if we ran Joe Biden, he could have won.
But that still doesn't make it right.
Now who's right? Well, this is the issue with the post hoc fallacy. Well, I agree. I agree with you that it doesn't mean he should be. This is the issue with the confidence of post hoc fallacy. He has every person who is confidently saying he should run. He's the best choice. They would have felt just as vindicated in that future hypothetical. And they would have felt then that their reasoning is sound and they would have bolstered their own confidence in their belief system when we shouldn't have. It was a it was a it was a tornado of unknowns. It was hard to know the right decision. As somebody who was just trying to look at the data, I don't know. I don't want Trump to win. That was my bottom line. I think Trump's presidency is setting this country back 10 to 12 years economically at minimum, right? I think that's horrifying in an age where we might be entering a Cold War with China and Russia. That is like the worst thing we could possibly do for this country right now. And so the most important thing to me is that Trump isn't winning. So in this case, I was of the team of being like, probably we should let Biden run. And then maybe we should finally make some laws about not letting 80-year-olds run for candidate. Like, let's just finally put some age restrictions in, right? But we can't because all the old people are in there and they're never going to restrict themselves out of a job.
I think that you're right. I think that it's easy to go back and go, oh, well, I was right because, this happened and maybe Biden would have won. I think the problem is even if he had have, like you say, it's an age problem.
For sure.
And the DNC really should, I think, really consider the distrust that they created simply by because straight up people lied to our face, right? And I think that there can be all these facts about what we liked about Biden. He got some stuff done. He had a good presidency in the sense that the bar is very low, So it's not like he was like a tremendous president, but he got some stuff done. And they say he's the most progressive president ever. But again, that's a very low bar because even Obama's most progressive thing wasn't that progressive, So I think that the DNC seems to
never let good become the enemy. Never let perfect become the enemy of good. It's a very big leftist problem.
Yeah, I would agree, but I also initially just have an allergic reaction to incrementalism because I do believe that at some point, if a problem is big, you have to address it in a big way. And all these kind of like, I'm gonna, bend here and tinker around the edges. It's like I think we're done with that, because
then we're done with democracy. Incrementalism is fundamental to democracy. It's the nature of it. It's the natural emergence of a democracy. So if you're done with incrementalism, what you're saying is democracy doesn't work anymore. And I would say to you, what's better? Because democracy has been the only thing to give human rights in the way that it has. Not that it's perfect. There's a lot of work to be done, but I haven't seen anything better yet than democracy.
So what? I guess, but don't you agree that we have to fundamentally change the healthcare system?
Yeah, we do.
We can't do that in increments. Shouldn't that be done?
Probably will have to be. Like the only other option is a centralizing of power to the federal state and usurping of republic's power. So taking states' power away, because the reason why you guys have the healthcare system you do is because of state power, right? So what you would have to do is you would have to centralize a whole bunch of power to your executive branch, which already has so much power because of the way that your guys' congressional system works. And Trump is also already solidifying you more and more and more power to the executive branch. So you would have to consolidate all this power to your federal government, which you probably don't want to do, unless you want to get rid of the state stuff, which if you want to get rid of the state stuff, you can. But then you're looking at more of like a Westminster parliamentary system, which you can do. But there's a lot of problems with the Westminster parliamentary system, right? Like most Canadians will tell you, it's also not the greatest. Like as a Canadian, I like the statehood stuff more, even though I know it comes with problems. I would love to see universal healthcare in America, but if you don't want to basically violate the rights of states, it will be incremental. It must be.
I guess I don't see that as ever. It seems to me that we'll never get true progressive policy if we continue to get Democrats that get into power and then they like speak. Another problem too is the rhetoric is grand. Like Obama's rhetoric was like hope and change, and they got in there and then governed like Mitt Romney. He even admitted that. So I think that there's and that's a big part to why so many people voted for Trump. People voted for Obama and then they voted for Trump. Why is that? It's not because if Trump won because of racism,
Oh, because the
Why they say
Democrats are like the most unlikable group of people that exist on the planet today. Yeah,
how,
that's
how,
why. Yeah, and potentially the Kamala Harris swap was the biggest mumble. They probably would have had a better shot at keeping running Biden with all the problems that I think that comes with. They probably would have had a better shot, probably. But who knows? Maybe they wouldn't have.
yeah, we'll never
We'll
know. But
never know. We'll never know.
I
So my question to you is, what's true progressive politics? Because if I talk to a conservative, they'll tell me we'll never have true conservative politics. And that's true. And what you're saying, I would say, is that's true. We'll also never have true liberal politics. We're always going to have some sort of compromise of all of it, because that's what a democracy is.
I think compromise is fine. It just seems to me that, like, whether it's minimum wage or healthcare, there seems to be no compromise. It seems to just be, liberals get in, Democrats get in, and they just completely give in to Republicans. And you see a lot of people. I mean, Bill Clinton did this, where he just shifted the party to the right, and there is no real like working party in America, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Biden had a troubled history with unions. I understand he did some good stuff, but I understand he also didn't do some great stuff either. I don't think they had a perfect relationship. So I
Sure.
think that's another problem, is that the reason I feel like we'll never really truly get progressive and working class policy is because the Democrat Party, we can't even get our own party to look at the needs of the people. I mean, look at Zorahn, right? How did he win? He just spoke to,
Really, really good PR. Like some of the best run media campaign I think I've ever seen. His policies
yeah.
are like weird. Like $30 minimum wage, that that would economically that would economically destroy New York overnight. That
Oh,
can't
really?
happen. Yeah, it would specifically small businesses would be ruined overnight. This is why minimum
Maybe.
wage is such a contentious issue, because as you increase it, which is good for poverty, and I agree with that, it's terrible for small businesses. You know who doesn't
Okay.
suffer as much? Big businesses. They just
Okay.
fire
So,
people. But
so
small
is it
businesses just go under.
right? So, are you against minimum wage at all? Like, do
No.
you?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Be it has to be an incremental, slowly, non-stagnating. So what I'm opposed to is minimum wage stagnation, which has occurred, right? I'm actually opposed vehemently to any form of wage stagnation. Here's my more radical position. If you want to decide if a CEO, regardless of whether a billionaire or not, is a good or bad person, look at his corporate profit versus his employee wages. If his corporate profit has gone up and his wages have stagnated, so they've stayed about the same for his employees, that's a piece of shit. That company's
Yes.
a piece of shit. The stakeholders are pieces of shit, and the boards are pieces of shit. All of that, the allowance of wage stagnation that has occurred, the fact that CEOs and stakeholders prioritize only quartile bottom lines over things like pride in their company is horrifying to me, right? But minimum wage is a good band-aid for poverty. But like rather than minimum wage, for example, I'm way more interested in finding actual effective tax reform and doing things like UBI. I don't think minimum wage solves their problem. I want competitive wages, and I want to, for example, if a company has experienced wage stagnation in the last 5 years, but their corporate profits have gone up by, like, let's say it's like 25%, they get hit with a huge fine, right? I want things like this because that returns money to the middleman, right? And when money is in the middle class, that money goes to entrepreneurs, they go to small businesses, it goes to local schools, it goes to
Yes.
local taxes, right? If you get money into the middle class, that's where you actually start seeing trickle down. But right now, what we're
Yeah.
seeing is the middle class is being decimated. We have a K type situation where there's a funnel down and there's a funnel up, and there's not really anything in between. That's really bad, right? So I think one of the issues that we have on the progressive side, this is something that I will talk to progressives about a lot, is your guys' economic policy is really poor. I don't think most progressives understand economics even a little bit, and it shows. And it's a really, really big problem, which is why people could get behind Zorahn Momdani's $30 minimum wage or rent freezing. When it's like, we've seen rent freezing time and time again. We know empirically all it does is it leads to landlord negligence, things not getting repaired, and small landlords going out of business to get swallowed up by conglomerates, right? If you want to see BlackRock take over New York City, rent freeze. That's what you should do. And also it'll guarantee that all of those rooms will suck way more than they already probably do.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I'd agree. There is a lack of actual understanding in the nuances. I think that most people on the ground, especially in New York, I lived there for like, a year and a half, paying New York rent, moving around. It is ridiculous. So I can 1,000% understand how maybe people might not have all of the information on how every policy will play out, but they do understand their immediate
Hmm.
reality. And that's what Zoran was talking to, and that's what I think
Yes,
Democrats need to get better at. They need to
I agree.
actually get better at speaking to working class
Not just
people.
speaking, actually
And,
solving
and
working
then
class people issues. That's what they
yeah,
need to do. And Zoran was the only
yeah,
one to be like, hey, this is a problem. Like, what was
yes,
Kamala's mantra? Keep on, keep it on, like status quo. It's like nobody wants status quo. That's the
yes,
Democrats' issue. That's the lib issue. Is we're like, let's just like, there's too much radicalism. We need status quo. And it's like the
yeah,
reason there's
yeah,
so much radicalism is because there is so much disparity. And if you
yes,
don't address disparity, you will just breed more radicalism. And the radicalism will go left and right because your political preferences dominant. There's a lot of genes that go into this, right? And personality factors. All you're going to see is people radicalize left and right. If you want to actually make people less radical, make it so that they can afford their eggs, they can afford their rent, and they can look at their kids and say, there is a dream that you can have. You can have the American dream. And right now, most millennials are like struggling to own a home, struggling to like decide if they can afford kids. You want to talk about the fertility crisis? UN, when I don't know if you know this, UN, when it assumes things about like population, so they estimate population growth because they have to, because like third world nations are not very good at counting births. So they do a lot of like weird things to estimate it. One of the estimations that they build into the assumption on the world's population in the next like 20 years is that first world nations will just figure out healthcare eventually to the point that people start having children, right? If you want to boost fertility, make having children affordable and make your work-life balance workable, right? Make it so that people can get by working 32 hours a week and they can have a good life. Because right now, you can't get by with 40 hours a week for most people if you're like making like less than like probably like $45 an hour, right? Let alone having kids, right? And that's a tragedy we put people in. We're making people choose between having legacy and progeny and children and family and being able to pay rent. And your acute immediate stress is
yeah,
always going to win, right? Yeah, it's
yeah,
so frustrating. And so
yeah,
yeah, it's this very interesting thing where like if we this is where when I tell the liberals when they're like, because all my liberal friends will be like, oh, I hate populists. And I'm like, that's crazy because the people love them. And there's a reason why they love them is because
yeah,
they listen. When the people say, we can't afford money, we can't afford things, they listen. And the liberals go, well, the policies they suggest are terrible. And I'm like, well, I agree. A lot of the time, economically, they're not the best policies. Because you'll notice every progressive that gets voted become a lot more liberal once they have budgets and economics that they have to deal with.
yeah. Why is that?
Because economics will liberalize you, because you will realize that fundamentally certain things can't work. Right. And to find a solution to money in a complex economy, in a complex world, you need really sophisticated policy. And nobody really has the answer. So liberals, their answer is, well, it's been working mostly pretty good so far, which is not a good enough answer anymore. And I agree with
Yeah,
that. But that was a pretty good answer in the 90s because the 70s, the 60s, and the 80s happened. It's just not really a good answer in the 2020s. And that's the
no,
problem.
they need to, and I really feel like the DNC. Do they know any of this? Are they aware of the messaging problem?
So
And just the talking to people's needs, because there's so many Democratic elites that like hesitated to get behind Zoran. It's like I feel like they don't understand the lesson here is to really talk to people, talk to Trump voters, and then try to you know answer their needs.
yeah, so it's funny. I kind of call like the really staunch liberals, like the old school, especially like economic liberals. I call them like our Tylenol Americans. They're going to get really fixated on rules, right? So I went to a liberalism conference in September. So I was talking to all the old
Oh, that sounds
guys.
fun.
Yeah,
Oh
all
wow.
the thought leaders of liberalism, the liberals, the status quo people. And I was the most populist person there, which is funny because my populist friends would be like, you're not a populist. You're just like radical in just a few enough right ways.
Right.
Um, but they'd all be like, this Zorahn guy, I mean, rent freezing, we know that doesn't work. $30 minimum wage. And I was like, guys, he's a populist. Like none of this is He's not going to do $30 minimum wage. Probably, right? But he's right to be like, that's so stupid. It is bad. It is bad economic policy. The issue that I'm trying to get through their heads is being like, the people aren't getting behind Zorahn because of $30 minimum wage. They're getting behind Zorahn because he's saying there is a problem and we need to root it out. That's why people are behind Zorahn. And so I try to get liberals to understand, if you want to have effective policy, you need to speak to people, understand the feelings, and then design policy that actually solves those problems, right? The problem is that, and this is what I'll say to the progressives, you guys are assholes. You guys do let perfection be the enemy of good, right? Look at the progressive response to abundance. That was the most embarrassing reaction of the progressive movement I think I've ever seen. Even today, when I talk to progressives, they're like, oh, are you in abundance, bro? And I was like, I mean, I'm for any policy that makes poor people's lives better. Yeah, generally, right? And they're like, well, I am too. And I'm like, then you like, there's problems with the abundance book. There are things, for example, of not talking about BlackRock. It doesn't talk enough about these conglomerates gobbling up all the land. I agree. Right. I agree with that. But he's not fucking wrong about why for the last like 40 years, housing hasn't been built, because it hasn't just been BlackRock. You know who wants to build houses? Massive conglomerates. They can't either. That is still actually a problem. And so while progressives are mad that we're not, I think Sam Cedar unironically said, yeah, I'm mad at you, Ezra, because you didn't say rich man bad enough. I think he almost verbatim said that. And it's like, that is purity testing. You're basically saying, I'm going to throw out everything you're saying here because you're not shitting on my enemy hard enough. That is not good. That is not good in-group policing at all. Good in-group policing is saying, hey, these policies about like environmental vetoes from the 70s, they probably should go and should be updated because they veto new environmental projects. That's a really bad policy. Also, can we talk about ways to break up massive conglomerates from owning housing? When we zone for things, can we come up with creative strategies to prevent massive conglomerates from buying up all of the housing? Is there a way, if we build an apartment building, to ensure that it's small private landlords that are purchasing those? Because a landlord with 10 properties is a much better landlord usually than a BlackRock. BlackRock will give you a standard, but also if you have a problem, you're fucked. The 10 thing landlord, he's either a scum landlord who sucks or he's the best landlord ever. And everyone knows this because I've rented and I've had scum landlords. I've had companies, which I now avoid like the plague because they're the worst. And then what you try to do as a renter is you try to find a landlord who's a small-time landlord who's a really good person, right? And they exist. And we need those people to succeed. We really want them because renting is not going away. There's a lot of people who like renting, who prefer it. I know lots of rich people who don't want to own. They want to rent because they like to move all the time. They don't want to be like bought down to a single property, right? And so when progressives get so mad about you didn't perform for me hard enough, now the policy's gone. Because liberals, who are your Democrats by and large, because old people are liberal and old people vote, liberals are getting attacked from conservatives and they're getting attacked from progressives. They have no friends. As somebody who's a liberal, we've got no friends. Nobody really likes us. And this is where I think progressives really need to get their priorities straight. What matters here? Is it saying rich man bad? Is that what matters here? Not entirely. For media, sure. For media.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
For policy discussion, because that's what abundance is. It's a policy discussion.
Right.
I don't know if rich man bad is the important performance here. What's important here is, do the policies actually lead to good outcomes for poor people? Does it actually funnel income back to poor people? Does it open up housing to make it more affordable? That's what we should be asking here. And does it open up housing to be more affordable in a way that people would want to live? AKA, is the houses being built of a standard that we can live with, right? These are important policy questions, but that's not what Sam Cedar or Emma Vigeland or any of these progressive people were asking. They were saying, you didn't say rich man bad enough. And everyone rallied behind that, and they want to toss out abundance. Don't toss out abundance. Improve it.
Okay, yeah, you know what? I think that's a fair point. I do see a lot of people getting mad at not seeing the performance enough. I mean, the Zorahn Trump meeting is a perfect example of that. There were actually people on the left that were mad that it was too cordial. And I'm just trying to understand, like, there is a show, right? And even the whole fascist, the moment of Trump allowing Zoran to call him a fascist is all I need to see about what politics is. It's a lot of show. It's just a team. But at the end of the day, when the two people get in the room, it is about working with the other person.
It is.
And it's about improving people's lives. And the reason Zoran is even there is because people's lives in New York are so shitty that they elected a dirty Muslim. I'm kidding. But that is
The New Yorkers are so tolerant that they understand religion is less important than policy.
yes, no, that's so great. I thank you so much for doing this. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Yeah,
But this was great. I thought that you were incredible when I saw you, and I really I'm trying to do. I usually only talk to more conservative people, but I'm trying to
cool.
bridge the gap because I am more of a progressive person. But yeah, I think that yeah, you make a lot of good points. But one thing that I'll never understand is just how I think the elites. The next time you're in the room with these people, these DNC people, I mean, I beg you to let them know, like they have to understand that it's not working. What used to work, like you said, in the 90s, the tactics, the rhetoric, it's like they have to
I
speak to
agree. Well, they're all coastal elites. They're all like Yale, Harvard lawyers. Like that's what they are, right? I literally told them
yeah,
all, you guys should go to a camp and like work with poor kids for like a summer.
yeah,
Like that might ground you a little bit because they're just like because they do the progressive performance. As much as the progressives are mad, they will perform like you guys. This is something I'll always laugh with, like actual like I love talking to progressives that you can tell come from like poverty or working class because they're very different than most of the progressives, which are from upper class. And what you
yeah,
have in politics is actually progressives who are upper class because a lot of the younger people, especially in politics, they're mad at the Democrats too. They want to be more progressive too. And then I'll be like, I don't know if you've ever like worked at Walmart. Like I doubt it actually. Like they're the coastal elite. And so this is where I think a lot of this issue comes where the coastal elite progressives, they are obsessed with performance. They're
mm.
obsessed with performance and that's all they care about. And so you'll never get
Like
good policy out of them.
AOC wearing a tax the rich dress. That's
Yeah, but
like
AOC, God, she's really come into herself. And AOC is somebody who did come from working class. Like she's actually a populist who I think has earned her merits. And even more so, as she's been in Congress, she's gotten the game, which is you have to make friends and you have to make compromises because if you want to get shit done, you have to get people behind you. And not everyone will agree with you. That's just the reality of life. And AOC, yeah, I was not sure about her because she was like kind of doing a lot of that performance. I didn't like the white crying at the fence thing. I was like, this is weird. I don't like this, right?
yeah,
But damn, some of her moves have been good. I've been really impressed with her. I think she's really coming into her own. I think she's like the gold standard of what progressives should be looking for in a politician, which I know a lot of progressives will be mad to hear me say, but that's fine.
no, I think that there's a real fear, and I think you can acknowledge this that of someone making too many deals and concessions to where they just lose completely what they were in the beginning, right? Like you get into Congress and you have one energy, and then you start shaking hands, making deals, and go, you know what, I'll give you this, but then you would never get it. It's like you give up everything, and then years down the line, it's like, well, we didn't even really get anything. You just kept making deals and concessions, and I think that there's a strong. I mean, we see this all the time. With that, people are afraid that Zoran is going to do this, right? You say a bunch of stuff. We'll see. We'll see if it happens. And I
He's
think
going
people,
to. He is going to, and he must. And if he doesn't, he will never get elected again. He'll be an ineffective politician. If
I
you
agree.
want your good stuff to happen, you cannot let perfection be the enemy of the good. And this is the progressive cross. It is. This is your guys' thorn. Is you guys do allow perfection to be the enemy of good.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think I mean that's a great point, and we'll see. We'll time will tell, but I'd love to check back in later and see what your
I'm really
thoughts
hopeful
are.
for Zorahn. He seems to be he's quick. He's smart. I think he's gonna do
Yeah,
I think he's gonna do an awesome job.
yeah,
I'm very, very hopeful for Zorahn. Yeah.
yeah. That's good to me too. We'll see. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I've been let down by literally everybody. So except for
Well, if
maybe,
you it depends on what you mean by let down. If they pass a few policies I don't like and they pass a few policies I do, I'm mostly happy with a politician.
I guess I'd agree. What are some of the things that AOC did that you were happy with?
Most of the way that she's conducted herself. So the way that she has been, um, kind of like ferociously for pulling together. So a lot of people don't realize this. The DNC is not very unified. There's kind of two dominant camps. There's like the old fogies and there's the young, right? And the young is very mixed because you've got like a Josh Shapiro who's like damn near a moderate, but then you've also got like more AOC Bernies. And it's not only old and young, but there's kind of like the Hakeem Jeffries team. And that's going to be all of your like very classic lib, very more status quo. That's going to be more the Clinton, more the Obama space. And they've had power since Obama. He was like their golden child, right? Obama was from that party. He really solidified their strength. And now underneath them is kind of this Bernie AOC or kind of the heads of it. But there's increasingly people like pulling beside them. The issue is that they've had issues, right? They've had a number of, I think Jasmine Crockett has been pretty optically bad for that group. She says like a lot of like wild shit.
Yeah.
What was his name? The guy who pulled the Jamal Bowman, right? Jamal Bowman, I think also he had a bunch of really big optical slip ups that just like the leftists like, the socialists like, and every other voting Democrat doesn't like, right? So
Yeah.
they've done a lot of things to really optically turn themselves off to the vote, which makes sense. That's why Jamal Bowman didn't win, right? He didn't win because his local constituents weren't even donating to him, right? Like most of his money came from like outside sources. It wasn't from his
I heard it was because of APAC.
Yeah, that's what everyone likes to blame. Like Emma Vigeland blamed that as she promised to come to a canvassing event that I helped organize for Jamal Bowman and that didn't show up. So everyone loves to blame APAC. The reality is that George Latimer, I believe 70% of his donations came from his district. Big names in his district, but his district. He represented his people. Jamal Bowman didn't. And whenever we would go to door and talk to people about Jamal Bowman, they'd be like, yeah, I voted for him like the other day, last year, but like I was super embarrassed by him like pulling like that was a big one, pulling the fire alarm or whatever. And then some of his comments around October 7th, I think he was like, I think he did rape denial. He did something like rape denial or something like that around that. Like people were like, maybe we don't need to do this. Like maybe we could like be like, yeah, the Hamas situation is really, really bad and we care about Palestine. Also, like, don't rape and murder civilians. It was something like that. I can't remember exactly what his like stuff was around that. But when we went door to door, most people who were former voters for him, those are the two things they listed. They were like, no, that was yikes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
You know what? I
Everyone
think
loves to blame the Jews, but it was actually his media presence.
No, he definitely didn't do himself any favors. Is there anything? Is there any I guess value in the critique of how powerful APAC is in considering
For sure.
it's like they can
Yeah, of course.
decide and they have nothing to do with the ground. Like the people in the actual community, they don't care about them.
No.
So
Yeah, I think there's huge issues with the issue that my problem is people are like, oh, APAC's so bad. And I'm like, there's a lot of specialty packs like this. I don't like any of them, actually. I don't like APAC. I don't like lots of specialty packs. In fact, almost all carry committees are probably up to something not good, right? Like, and the issue is like, I don't like the APAC hate because I'm like, this feels Jew oriented, and I don't love the rising of the JQ, right? But like, yeah, you should criticize APAC all you want. It's like, as a Canadian especially, we have like the Quebec issue where like we have Quebec always just self-advocating for only Quebec and only giving benefits to Quebec, even at the federal level. And it's like, sorry, there's a whole ass country here, actually. We don't have the Alberta Party, which is strange, right? So like, yeah, I think when you have special interest groups that don't care about Americans, they care about one select group of Americans and non-Americans, and that's about it. I think that's a problem. Yeah, especially when they amass so much money and so much power and so much influence because it makes our politics not good, right? But APAC isn't the only one of these. And I think people are obsessing with APAC, A, because of IP, which is fair, but also because of IP, everyone's liking the Jew question a lot. And that's not good. We should don't do that.
It's definitely a touchy subject, but I think that the amount of money that is spent by APAC is really why it's a lightning rod. On top of hating Jews is in right now. But there has
I'd
to be
have to
somewhere.
see if APAC spends even more than like Musk. APAC, I think they do spend more than.
I think they're both terrible, really. I mean, I think
Yeah,
honestly, we need to limit all of
100
it.
million. Yeah, they spent like less than half that Musk spent.
So I think that I think that's still too much. But
I
yeah, you're right.
agree.
Yeah, for
100
sure.
million. So this is something people don't understand about federal elections. 100 million is a lot in one election for like a congressman. For a president, it's probably 1/8, 1/6. Like, especially this is 100 million in the 2024 primarily supporting candidates. So this is all across everything. So that means they're not even spending 100 million on one candidate. They're probably spending 20 million per candidate. 20 million is a lot, but when you're running for Congress, um, it could definitely be the difference. I just people don't understand the scopes of what super PACs are spending. 20
It's all
million.
bad. It's all bad.
Uh, it's not managed. Carry committees are evil. Yeah, carry committees are rad. They're just carry committees are super PACs, which are the people who can spend this amount, and all of it's bad. And so it's like
Right.
I have a
Right.
hard time criticizing APAC any more than I criticize Musk or like any other super PAC. I think Future Forward, which is a super PAC, I think it raised 450 million alone for Kamala Harris. Like it was the funnel of like 450 million. That PAC alone basically got to decide Kamala Harris's campaign. And they were really stupid. Frankly, as somebody who worked with them a lot, they were the worst. They were not good, right? So it's like, I have an issue with Future Forward too, which is they're not a specialist group for a specific ethnicity, but they had a very specialist group of people at top that had a very specific agenda. They're the largest reason why we held on to Biden for so long, right? So like,
There's
when we're
problems. Yeah. Yeah.
people need to be aware how much money is in politics. Like 100 million
Absolutely.
is a lot of money and
Yeah.
it will sway, which is a problem. It's not as much money as you think it is in the game of federal politics.
No, I think that it's good to put it in context, but at the end of the day, I think everyone has an understanding of, politicians are beholden to whoever gives them money, and that
Mhm.
works against the interests of people. And that's really the initial thing. But I think it's important to openly criticize, AIPAC and even the government of Israel. It's
Yeah,
important to criticize them because if people who are anti-Semitic don't, then we leave space to the Nick Fuenteses. And
I agree.
also, it's like, and then anytime you try to, critique, hey, the government of Israel, not the people, just the government, they
Yeah.
go, well, that's anti-Semitic. It's like, is it everything? Criticism can't be anti-Semitic. I think
No,
we
but a
should
lot
step.
of them are because when people
Yeah,
are trying to be
yeah,
like, well, Israel doesn't equal Jew, it's like, yes, it does. Yes, it does. It really does. Zionism basically equals Israel, which equals Jew, right? The issue is that like I agree. You also need to be able to critique Jews. Like Jews
mhm,
are understandably, let's be very clear. There's a reason why they are very insular and they always want to protect the Jewish identity and they very much like turn to one another and they hire one another.
why
There's a lot
is
of
that?
nepotism
Why is
because
that?
of pogroms, because they've been pogromed for uh, two like since ever since they found since King what which king fell, not David, whenever they were destroyed by what was the first group that destroyed them? I think it was the Assyrians. The
Okay.
first time that they were split when the northern tribe fell, they've basically been diaspored over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? And why? It's because religiously they were more capable of being mercantile class because they had within their religious like belief system stuff set up for specifically talk about like debt and the handling of debt. Whereas, for example, a lot of religions felt that like having debt, like holding on to other people's debt was like bad. So a lot of people couldn't even participate in it, right? So they like fell into a mercantile class and money makes the world go round, right? And as a result, people get very embittered when a certain ethnicity has a large amount of the money, but the reason that the ethnicity has the money is because of a lot of their beliefs. They also get pogromed constantly, so the only thing that they get to take with them is their minds. And unfortunately, One thing that is very easy to take with you is business savvy. But what's not easy to take with you is a herd of cattle, right? When you're getting pogromed. And so the
Yeah.
reason that they're so insular is because they have been persecuted for being an other in the same way that the Romani people have.
Yeah.
Right? Because they've always been an other, because they've held strongly to their distinct cultural ethnicity, which is fine to do. It's not bad to hold to your
Yeah.
ethnicity, right? I wish more groups did, right?
I
And
do.
as a
Yeah, for
result,
sure.
when you have problems, when you have disparity, the other, the immigrant, right? The illegal, the Hispanic, the other is the easy group to blame. And when the
I agree.
other is different than you, has different traditions. And so what happened? They got genocided and pogromed and massacred constantly. There's a reason why there isn't Jewish people in like any of their neighboring states. And it's because they won't allow them, they pogrom them, they kick them out, or they killed them.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
Israel existing is not like, not that I want to get a ton into Israel and Palestine, because I don't want to like hold water for what they're doing right now. I think it's bad. I think
Right.
full stop, it is bad. It is
Yes.
wrong.
Right. Yes. I
No
agree.
question. The problem with my JQ is people being like, well, why are they so special? And I'm like, I don't know. Look at their history. Everyone's been trying to kill them forever. Of course, they're a little bit distrusting of others and tend to be
Yeah.
insular. Of course they are, because they realize they can't trust any other country to take care of them. They got to take care of themselves. And that was a really reasonable thing. And they decided that, by the way, before World War II, right? When this was all getting decided, because there was two camps in the Jewish kind of ethnic group. There was the assimilators who basically like act like you're normal. And then when you're at home, have your ethnicity. And then there was the people who are going to Israel, the Zionists, being like, nah, man, we're proud Jews. They started their thing. Zionism wasn't super popular with all Jews. But then World War II happened. And then all the Jews were like, you know what? They're kind of cooking with that one, because you know who won't genocide us? Our own people. We're probably not going to do that. So it's like,
I think that's a good point. Yeah, it's a complicated history, and people
it is.
should take in the reason that we're even in this situation. With that said, there's no excuse for bombing.
It doesn't excuse war crimes. It also doesn't excuse war crimes,
exactly,
right?
right?
That's
Yeah,
also true, right? All of this is
Right.
true. And this is the problem, is people can't disentangle these things, right? People who've probably listened to this and just heard me give all this explanation of Israeli history is like, why are you excusing it? Giving their history is not excusing any of the war council or Netanyahu. It's not excusing them at all. I want them.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I want them Nuremberg trialed. I want them put in jail. I want them fined. Like, I have no go gloves off with them. I do not care. They are like, Netanyahu is evil to me. He's an evil person, right?
Mhm.
That's fine with me. You also have to understand the history of the area and the people.
Yeah, it's
You have
definitely nuanced. Yeah. One last question. Do you find any value in speaking with people like Nick Fuentes? Because I'll hear people go, "Oh, we have to just ban him completely." They deplatform him, people like
Yeah.
that. But he's only grown, and I think
Yeah.
he even just did Piers Morgan. Nick,
I'm not surprised. Probably.
Yeah.
He won against Ben Shapiro. He beat Ben Shapiro in the right civil war.
He did.
Which is
Do you
terrifying.
think that? Do you think that we should debate and kind of take that, what he's doing, and meet it with, you fight bad information with good information, right? Not with ignoring it. Do you agree with that?
I think so. Nick Fuentes is a very difficult. So my rule for platforming is I won't debate anyone where I don't feel very confident that I can put up a good fight. Not that I have to win, but I need to not underestimate that person. And no one should underestimate Nick Fuentes. He's very shifty. He's practiced his rhetoric a lot. He's also got Europa, The Last Battle behind him. If you're going to debate Nick Fuentes, you need to watch Europa, The Last Battle, and read all the reasons why it's wrong. You need to do both of these things, right? If you don't understand neo-Nazis and what they believe, you shouldn't be debating Nick Fuentes. You shouldn't be platforming Nick Fuentes, right? It would have been, if nobody platformed Nick Fuentes, that would have been the best thing possible. But the issue is some people were willing to, because he's salacious and he hates Jews, and he got him with the red pill, which is filled with a bunch of people who really hate Jews for whatever reason. And as a result, he is now becoming mainstream. Now we have to talk about Nick Fuentes. Now we have to talk to Nick Fuentes. but you need to be skilled. And I think one of the issues when I look at like left debate is the left is generally more educated, very smart people. But I think because so many conservative voices got deplatformed that we just thought that we won the debate. Saying to somebody, what you're doing is morally wrong, what you're saying is morally wrong, isn't very selling anymore because we've cried wolf too many times, right? When like I've been called a Nazi, I've been called all these things. Like every single person who was weaponizing those words incorrectly. Yeah, of course. I've been called a communist and a Nazi, of course. I do internet politics. But that's the problem, right? Is the sloping that we have done with these words where we have allowed, like, Nazi doesn't mean anything anymore. That's bad, actually. I want to be the case that if I say, yes, I think this person is fascistic, that people go, oh, that's not good. In the same way that if I say this person's pedophilic, that people go, oh, that's not good, right? But we are weaponizing these words like so much that we've allowed concept creep, right? If every single person is now a racist and a sexist and a fascist and a Nazi, now no one is. And the actual people who are the problem, they get to be like, oh, you've been called a Nazi because like Lindsay Ellis got called a racist because she made some video about the dragon show and they were like, this is appropriation because it's like Asia. I don't know. It was stupid. It was stupid. It was like in the height of all of that stupidity. But the height of that stupidity, the left has not taken account for the fact like we shot ourselves in the foot. Our moral grandstanding is over. This is the same thing as when a Christian grandma or a Christian Karen, even worse, a Christian Karen says, you're sinning. Nobody gives a shit at all. Because to her, everyone's sinning. Everyone's not good enough. We did what the Christians did. And why nobody liked the Christians like 20 years ago. It's because they were like running around wagging their fingers at everyone and being like, oh, you're all sinful. You're all bad. You're all going to hell. And you're like, well, if we're all going to hell, yes, we have lots of company, right? Whatever. Who cares now? We did that just with other words. And so, yes, we should now, not yes. Now we have to debate Nick Fuentes. What a fucking tragedy that is.
Yeah, you're right.
And
we have
if you do, be prepared. Like, do not assume that what works to convince your side will convince his. And increasingly, the moderate is not going to be compelled by just like left talking points. You actually have to deal with the ideas and break down why they're wrong. And the problem with Nick Fuentes is he's a very sophisticated liar. He is unquestioned. He is a lying little rat. Like when I think about Nick Fuentes, I go, maybe the Victorian duels weren't the worst thing ever, right? I think he is terrifying. I think he's a type of person who is so charismatic and so funny and has such a driven group with a purpose behind it. And he's willing to lie to them and say anything. And he hates his audience. He thinks they're disgusting. He thinks they're stupid, and they probably are. And also, they're motivated. And also, they donate money. You know who doesn't donate money? The left, by the way. If you're a left content creator, good luck, as I'm sure you know. If you're a right content creator, as somebody who has audience from like all the way from like progressive communists to kind of like moderate, I don't think I have many MAGA people. I'm a little too anti-Trump, I think, but maybe I have some MAGA people. My conservative, moderate, right viewers are my biggest donors, always. They come to more of my events, right? Even though my audience is 65% left. We've got a big issue on the left. We don't support our own. We don't unify. We don't get behind each other. And we're too afraid to even like retweet when, who's a moderate? When Josh, maybe that's not a good one because he's not that spicy. Who's like a moderate that people don't like? Ethan Klein. Let's use Ethan Klein. When Ethan Klein cooks, you should retweet that. A retweet of Ethan Klein is not a carte blanche sign off on Ethan Klein's behavior or his beliefs. It's not.
Right.
And we don't have any space for this, right? If you want to see the left succeed in the media space, we need to engage with one another. We need to understand that engaging with one another is not a carte blanche sign off of everyone's ideas. Give each other a little bit more grace and financially support each other, specifically the rich ones, because you're out there. You're all tech bros. So got to give money because the right's doing it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we there's a lot that we can work better on our side, and I think that you made a lot of great points, and I agree. Yeah, and I just find it so refreshing just hearing another lefty or whatever you call it. What would you
I'm a
identify as
liberal, but
again?
like I support
Liberal.
lots of
Okay.
progressive stuff. Like I
Right. Okay.
basically support anything that I could get behind. And especially right now, anything that is not for Trump, I'm pretty much going
Yeah.
to get behind. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, thank you so much for doing it. This was amazing. Where can
Yeah.
people find you?
I am not so erudite. That's spelled Erudite, one word, not so erudite. You can find me everywhere. YouTube is my primary. Once my ears heal, I should be back to making content and streaming. I typically stream, so that's where you can find me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, I'm a fan, and yeah, hopefully we talk again soon.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, no problem. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye.